Shalom to Alan Hoffman, Director General of the Jewish Agency.
Hi, shalom to you and to all your viewers.
So on the final day of the 2013 Jewish Agency Assembly, you're focusing on something very important, education.
We had a fascinating morning this morning in which we dealt with Israel education. This is a very hot topic. We know a lot about Israel advocacy, but the question that was dealt with today is how do we help young people not only to love Israel, to hug Israel, to be great advocates, but also how to struggle with the issues of Israel, because part of the feeling that I think underlay the entire conversation today was that many young people who may have big questions about Israel and are alienated because of their perception that the community demands them to have total loyalty. And I think the interesting question about next generation of young Jews, whether they came on birthright or even whether they're on your programs here in Israel, is how do we help them to be people who are both passionate about Israel, and they spoke today about joy, but also are able to be engaged and critical at the same time. I think that when we talk about education, we always talk about three things. We talk about knowing and feeling and doing. And I think all education has to include those three concepts, particularly when it comes to Israel education. There is part of knowing, and it's clear that many of our young people certainly do not know enough about the conflict, about Israel, about history, about Jewish texts in Israel. But there's also the issue of feeling, and this is where programs like Birthright and Masa really have the ability to engage young Jews at their gut level. And then comes the acting. After you've had knowing and feeling, what are you going to do about it? How are you actually going to act in the world with regard to Israel?
So how do you reach the target audience? How do you eventually go out and educate?
We reach them with several hundred young Israelis doing shlichut. We reach them with 1,500 young Israelis who go to Jewish summer camps around the world and engage with 60,000 kids. We reach them with 40,000 people who come in on Birthright, and the Jewish Agency is a partner in Birthright. We reach them with Masa, which will have close to 11,000 people this year. And in the future, we have to reach them through social networks and all the different places where young Jews congregate in social networks, and we don't know how to get to them. And we reach them through Arutz Sheva.
Now, if you could please tell us a bit about something that actually began last week, a special initiative, the Government of Israel Jewish World Strategic Planning Summit.
What happened last week is, I think, a very important milestone in the relationship between the State of Israel and the Jewish people. I think that Birthright was the beginning of this process where some philanthropists came to the government of Israel and the government of Israel joined them. Masa was the next stage in which the Jewish Agency and Arik Sharon's government agreed to co-fund an initiative. We now reach the third stage in the process where under Netanyahu's government, the government of Israel is turning to the world Jewry and saying, we want to help strengthen the connection of young Jews to the Jewish future and through Israel. We want to do it in partnership with the Jewish Agency, but we are engaging you, the communities and the organizations and the foundations, as partners. Come and tell us what are the important priorities, what are going to be the new programs. And so we spent 2 days in a very, very intensive place, many hours together with representatives of the government of Israel, representatives of World Jewry, the Jewish Agency as the facilitator and convener to decide on the new directions. And this is still in process. And I believe that in this coming year we will hear what are going to be the 3 or 4 major directions that are going to come out of this process.
Alan Hoffman, Director General of the Jewish Agency, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.